My mom stole my $45,000 college fund for my sister's house, so I slept in my car at 18. Now a millionaire, I faced them again, and turned the tables. For me, one of those occasions was seeing my sister Veronica and our mother Margaret walk into the welcome reception for my new $960,000 home. A home that reflected every single sacrifice, late night, every ounce of hustle I put into starting my IT company. Nonetheless, the knot in my stomach intensified and my skin crawled because I recognized the expression in their eyes. The exact expression I saw when I was 18, the night my entire world collapsed. Growing up in Boston, our family appeared to be rather normal. Dad works in finance, while Mom runs a boutique and has 2 daughters, as well as a golden retriever named Rusty. However, as the saying goes, appearances can be misleading. When I was 12, the cracks began to show. Dad walked out, and while the divorce wasn't spectacular, what happened next laid the foundation for years of pure family dysfunction. Veronica, 3 years my older, later married Daniel, an investment banker from an affluent family. Their wedding was spectacular, and Mom spent over $50,000 she didn't have, arguing that a daughter only gets married once. I was 19, working 2 jobs, attending community college, and barely scraping by to purchase my bridesmaid dress. Then came the babies: James, Freya, and Caleb. With each child, Veronica's attitude of entitlement developed, and Mom was always available to help them out, often at my expense. "Your sister has 3 children to feed," Mom would explain. "What do you need extra money for anyway? Books? Can't you just use the library?" Meanwhile, I was working myself to exhaustion. Scholarships helped, but without family support, I worked as a barista in the morning, a tutor in the afternoon, and a data entry clerk on weekends. Sleep was a luxury that I could not afford. Dad faded into obscurity after moving to Chicago and starting a new family. Mom honestly made it difficult for him to stay in touch with me by forgetting to notify me when he called, or mistakenly deleting his messages. But I persevered. While Veronica shared gorgeous family holiday images, I stayed up all night coding and studying. I graduated as the top of my class. Mom attended my high school graduation, but left early since Veronica called. James had a minor temperature. I've never complained. I simply accepted this as my reality and got motivated to create my own success on my own terms. I did not need their approval. What I didn't expect was how drastically things would shift on my 18th birthday. That night defined all that followed, culminating in the showdown 14 years later. My 18th birthday was on a Tuesday. I recall because I had managed to get the evening off, a rare occurrence. I wasn't expecting a major celebration. Veronica and Daniel were expecting their 3rd child, and they had the entire family's attention. Still, turning 18 seemed momentous. I was legally an adult, had completed high school, and received partial scholarships to 3 universities. When I returned home after tutoring, I found Mom and Veronica at the kitchen table, engrossed in spreadsheets. They scarcely glanced up. "Leftover lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry," Mom said, her gaze fixed on the papers. I heated a plate and joined them, intrigued. "What are you working on?" Mom asked, looking up. "Just figuring out some financial matters. Veronica and Daniel need a bigger house now that Caleb is on the way." I nodded, accustomed to such chats. But then a chill ran through me. "Why do you have my college paperwork?" Veronica sighed dramatically. "We might as well tell her, Mom." Mom smoothed the papers and glanced at me with that familiar gaze that usually comes before I have to make a family sacrifice. "Lena, we need to discuss your college plans," Mother told me. With Veronica expecting again, they really need a 4-bedroom house. Daniel's bonus wasn't as large as they expected this year, and they're a bit stretched. I sat calmly, knowing exactly where this was headed. "The thing is," says Veronica, "we've calculated everything. And even with Daniel's salary and Mom helping with the down payment, we're still short." "Short for what?" I inquired, even though I already knew. "We need to use your college fund," Mom said frankly. "It's not like you don't have scholarships already. And community college is perfectly respectable. You can transfer to a university later when things aren't so tight for the family." My college fund. The money Dad had started prior to the divorce. Mom's promised money for my schooling remained undisturbed. I was banking on this fund to bridge the gaps left by scholarships. "But that's my money," I replied gently. "Dad set it aside for my education." Veronica rolled her eyes. "Don't be selfish, Lena. We're talking about a home for your niece and nephews. Where are they supposed to sleep? Should Caleb just live in a closet because you want to attend some fancy university?" "That's not what I'm saying," I insisted. "But I've worked so hard for this. I've maintained a 4.0 GPA while working multiple jobs. Those scholarships won't cover everything. You can take out loans just like everyone else, Veronica snapped. Daniel and I have a mortgage. That's life. Or she might have said, you could live at home and attend community college. That would be much more economical. Something within me shifted. A lifetime of acquiescence and acceptance gave way to outright outrage. No. A simple word hung in the air. Mom blinked, not expecting any resistance from me. Excuse me? No, I said again, more forcefully this time. That money is for my education. Dad and you set it aside for me. It's not Veronica's house fund. Mom's expression tightened. This isn't a negotiation, Lena. This is what's happening. Your sister has a family to provide for. And I have a future to build, I responded, my voice cracking. I've earned those scholarships. I've worked while maintaining perfect grades. I deserve to use my college fund for college. Veronica chuckled in a chilly, disdainful tone. Oh, please. Like you know anything about real responsibility. Try having 3 children before you lecture us on what you deserve. Tears threatened, but I kept them back. This isn't fair, and you know it. Mom jumped up, scraping her chair. My priority is my education, I replied. That's not wrong. Well then, Mom said, crossing her arms. If that's your attitude, you have a choice to make. Accept that the money is going to help your sister, or pack your bags and figure out life on your own. You're 18 now, after all. An ultimatum hovered in the air. Veronica smiled, confident that I would back down as I had always done. But something had cracked within me. Years of being second best, putting Veronica's needs ahead of my own. I stood up gently. I'll pack my bags. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I hadn't been so afraid. Mom certainly did not expect me to choose independence. Don't be so dramatic. Veronica scoffed. Where would you even go? I didn't respond. I stepped into my bedroom and took out my largest luggage. I packed clothing, toiletries, my laptop and vital documents mechanically. Family portraits remained on the walls. They did not feel like mine anymore. Mom appeared in my doorway as I zipped the suitcase shut. You're being ridiculous. Sleep on it, and we'll discuss this rationally in the morning. There's nothing to discuss, I said, startled by my own serenity. You've made your position clear. I'm making mine clear too. I pushed my suitcase past her, retrieved my backpack from the hook near the front door, and stepped outside into the night. Nobody called after me. Nobody tried to stop me. That night, I slept in my car in the Walmart parking lot, with my work uniform as a cushion. For 2 weeks, I maintained that routine, working 3 jobs, sleeping in my car, and showering at the gym where I had a bargain membership. I told no one. On the 15th day, my computer science teacher, Professor Clara Hughes, observed me snoozing in the library. She softly awoke me and asked whether everything was fine. Something in her gentle eyes broke my carefully held composure, so I told her everything. That evening, she drove me to her house and showed me the guest room. It's yours until you figure things out, she explained simply. No one should face this alone. Professor Hughes became more than just a teacher. She became my mentor, advocate, and the first person who believed in me unconditionally. She assisted me in obtaining further scholarships, guiding me through financial aid applications, and providing a valuable reference for an internship that would eventually change my life. Everything that happened after the night I was kicked out was shaped by that experience. It showed me that I was completely on my own, but that chosen family can be more supportive than biological relatives. Most significantly, it demonstrated my personal strength. A strength I was unaware I possessed until I was forced to discover it. With Professor Hughes' help, I was able to secure enough financial aid, scholarships, and part-time employment to attend a local state institution rather than my ideal school. It wasn't Boston University, but it had a strong computer science curriculum, which I appreciated. College life was very different for me than for my peers. While they went to parties and joined clubs, I worked various jobs to remain afloat, including waitressing, staffing the university IT help desk, and completing freelance web development projects late at night. Sleep became a luxury, and social life was non-existent. Despite my hectic schedule, I maintained a flawless GPA. The computer science curriculum came easily, and I found myself assisting classmates who were struggling, one of whom was Isabella Tran. Isabella, a brilliant but distracted individual, became my best friend and eventual business partner. We were diametrically opposed in some respects. I was methodical. She was impetuous. I excelled at back-end programming. She had a knack for user experience and design. Together, we were ideal. During our junior year, we began talking about developing a money management app for young adults. The majority of existing tools were designed for those who were already financially secure, rather for those like us who were living paycheck to paycheck. We identified a gap and were motivated to fill it. Using campus resources, we created a prototype. We dubbed it SENS, an app that let users visualize their spending, automate their savings, and create responsible credit. Our teachers were impressed, but more significantly, our classmates found it quite beneficial. After graduation, Isabella and I had to decide whether to take stable corporate jobs or chase our business dreams. The safe option was appealing, especially considering my financial instability. However, I remembered Professor Hughes's words. Sometimes the riskiest path leads to the greatest rewards. We took a chance by moving into a tiny roach-infested flat to save money. We gave ourselves totally to SENS. I coded while eating ramen. Isabella worked on user interfaces till daybreak. We went to every networking event, pitch competition, and startup program we could find. 6 months of rejections ensued. Investors believed we were too young, inexperienced, or focused on the wrong demographics. College students don't care about financial planning, one venture entrepreneur remarked dismissively. But we persisted. We had a breakthrough when we received a small company grant, which enabled us to hire our first employee, a marketing professional who assisted us in refining our messaging. We shifted slightly, focusing on recent graduates with student loans rather than current students. The app gained traction gradually, then exponentially. We were highlighted on a technology blog. A financial influencer with millions of followers endorsed SENS, and our user base rose from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Throughout this process, I had occasional thoughts about reaching out to my relatives. I'd had very little interaction since that night. Mom called 3 months after I left, not to apologize, but to notify me that they had spent my college fund for Veronica's down payment. Dad sent periodic texts to check in, but our relationship remained distant. Instead, I focused on growing my business and my personal life. Years passed in a flurry of code, meetings, and eventual achievement. Isabella and I relocated from our shabby flat to a proper office. We employed additional developers, customer service agents, and marketing specialists. SENS developed into a comprehensive financial platform. 5 years after our start, we received an acquisition offer from one of the country's top financial technology organizations. The amount was staggering, enough to make Isabella and me wealthy multiple times over. We finally agreed after weeks of negotiations. I was 30 years old and suddenly richer than I had ever believed possible. The worried 18-year-old sleeping in her car appeared to be a completely different person. Financial security provided the freedom to make intelligent decisions rather than frantic ones. I invested the most of my windfall, gave to scholarships for first-generation college students, and eventually allowed myself to consider building a home, a genuine home, not just a place to sleep between work shifts. After months of searching, I discovered it. A lovely craftsman-style home in an upmarket neighborhood. At $960,000, it was a hefty investment, but it was well within my budget. The 4-bedroom home has character and charm, with hardwood floors, huge windows, a wraparound porch, and a large backyard. It needed modifications, but I spotted its potential right away. As I signed the closing forms, I considered the irony. 14 years ago, my college fund was depleted to help Veronica buy a larger home. Now, I was able to buy a property for about $1 million via my own work. During the restoration, I got an unexpected note from my father. He'd seen the news about SENS's acquisition online and wanted to congratulate me. Our chat was unpleasant, yet it opened up possibilities. He stated that he had lost track of me after I left and was too embarrassed to try harder to find me. He got divorced again and moved back to Boston. Would I consider meeting for coffee? That coffee meeting was tense, yet healing. Dad apologized for being absent during my challenging years. He confessed he was aware of the college fund predicament but felt unable to intervene. I didn't forgive him right away, but I appreciated his honesty. We agreed to focus on progressively restoring our connection. During our talk, he revealed that Veronica and Daniel were experiencing financial difficulties again. Apparently, they had to downsize once Daniel's company was restructured. Mom continued to help them in any way she could. "They don't know about your success," Dad remarked. "I haven't told them." I nodded, not sure how I felt about it. Part of me wanted them to know I was successful despite their lack of support. Another part preferred that my accomplishments remain quiet. As my house renovations neared completion, I planned a housewarming celebration. After considerable thought, I included my relatives on the guest list. Isabella worried I was setting myself up for disappointment, but I felt it was time to end that chapter of my life, one way or another. I extended formal invitations to Dad, Mom, Veronica, and Daniel. Dad answered promptly with acceptance. Mom called, astonished but agreeable. Veronica texted, "Looking forward to seeing how you're doing. We'll be there." The stage was set for a reunion I never expected, one that would be more dramatic than I could have imagined. The morning of my housewarming party was sunny and lovely. Despite staying up late to finish up the house, I awoke early. Every room was perfect. The living room with its comfortable sectional and built-in bookshelves, the gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, the dining room that could comfortably seat 12 people, and 4 beautifully appointed bedrooms upstairs, including a master suite with a balcony overlooking the backyard. Isabella arrived about 10 o'clock, laden with champagne and decorations. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she inquired, arranging flowers. "It's not too late to uninvite them." "I need closure," I said, my stomach churning at the prospect of seeing my mother and sister again. "Besides, they're just 3 people out of 30 guests. If things get uncomfortable, we'll have plenty of buffers." The caterers arrived at midday and set up stations on the first level. By 3, everything was ready. Food, drinks, music, and my nerves were frayed. My colleagues in technology arrived first, followed by neighbors. Professor Hughes arrived with her husband, embracing me warmly and whispering how proud she was. Friends from college, industry contacts, and my financial advisor completed the early arrivals. At 4:30, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to see my father standing awkwardly on the porch, holding a gift bag. "Dad," I replied, the words still seeming odd. "Lena," he said, looking at the house behind me. "This is impressive." I let him in, gave him a quick tour, and introduced him to a few guests. He appeared genuinely thrilled to see how well I was doing, if a little out of place among the successful professionals that occupied my home. "Your mother and sister should be here soon," he explained. "They were planning to come together." I nodded and refilled my water glass to conceal my uneasiness. "And how are they?" Dad paused. "Managing Daniel's job situation has been tough on them. They sold their house last year and moved to a townhouse. Margaret, your mom, helps with the kids a lot." Before I could react, Isabella appeared at my elbow. "More guests arriving," she said. "Including, I believe, your mother and sister." I took a deep breath and made my way to the front door. There they stood, Margaret, barely aged despite the 14 years, and Veronica, still lovely but with stress lines around her eyes. Behind them stood Daniel, who appeared much older and more worn than I remembered, and their 3 children, James, now a teenager, Freya, a preteen, and Caleb, about 10 years old. "Lena," Mom replied, her tone cautious. "Thank you for inviting us." "Welcome," I said, standing back to let them enter. "Please come in." The kids hung back sheepishly, evidently instructed to be on their best behavior. I smiled at them. I scarcely knew these nieces and nephews. "There's a game room upstairs if you get bored," I assured them. "Second door on the right." That broke the ice a little. James inquired if I had a gaming system, and when I said yes, the kids went upstairs. After a quick thank you, Daniel said, "Beautiful home." He gazed about with professional curiosity. "The architectural details are impressive." "Thank you," I responded. "The renovation took 6 months, but it was worth it." "6 months?" Veronica raised her eyes. "You must have had quite a team working on it." "I did," I said without elaborating. "Would you like a tour?" Leading them around the house, I watched Veronica's demeanor become more calculated. She ran her hand along the granite counters, glanced into closets, and commented on the great play area in the backyard. Mom followed more quietly, occasionally remarking on a decor or inquiring about a feature. "This must have been quite an investment," she finally murmured as we entered the main bedroom. "It was," I admitted, "but I've been fortunate in my career." "What exactly are you doing now?" Veronica inquired, sitting uninvited on the edge of my bed. Dad mentioned something about an app. I told them a shortened version of my success story, seeing their faces change from polite inquiry to astonished realization. "You sold your company for millions?" Veronica asked, her voice higher than usual. "We did," I said. "The timing was right." The tour continued downstairs where additional visitors had arrived. I introduced my family to Isabella, Professor Hughes, and colleagues and acquaintances who knew some of my tale. Throughout the introductions, I spotted Mom and Veronica gathered in corners, whispering passionately. Daniel appeared disengaged from their chats, instead truly interacting with my tech industry acquaintances. 1 hour into the celebration, I clinked my glass to get everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming to celebrate this new chapter with me, I told you. This house represents not just a place to live, but a milestone I once thought impossible. I'm grateful to everyone who supported me along the way. As I finished my brief statement, Veronica approached. As Lena's sister, I'd like to say something too. Her voice had that confident tone I knew from childhood. The voice that always preceded her getting exactly what she wanted. Family is everything, she added, resting her palm on my arm. And seeing Lena's beautiful home today has made me realize how perfect this would be for our family. The visitors exchanged perplexed murmurs. What Veronica means, Mom said softly, is that we're so proud of Lena for creating a space where family can gather. No, Veronica replied, tightening her grasp on my arm. What I mean is that this house would be perfect for my family. With Daniel's job situation and the kids needing good schools, we've been looking for exactly this kind of home in exactly this neighborhood. The room went silent, even the caterer had stopped moving. Veronica, Daniel began, his face flushing. This isn't the time or place. It's exactly the right time, she said. Lena's always wanted to help family. She's single, no kids, and clearly doing well financially. This 4-bedroom house is wasted on one person when we have 3 growing children who need space and stability. Mom nodded in accord. Family. I stood paralyzed, hardly believing what I was hearing. After 14 years of no contact, after seizing my college fund, they were now requesting, nay, expecting, that I give them my home. Lena, Mom said, her voice taking on that authoritative tone I recognized all too well. You need to pack your bags and find somewhere smaller. A condo downtown would suit your lifestyle much better, and it would mean the world to your sister's family. Veronica was already pacing around the living room pointing out the adjustments they planned to make. James could take the bedroom with the bay window. Freya would love the purple room, and Caleb would have so much space for his toys in the smallest bedroom. Mom joined in. After all Veronica's been through, she deserves this. It's the least you could do as her sister. The room had become utterly silent. My visitors glanced at us with terrified fascination. Isabella had rushed to my side, offering support but remaining mute. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the absurd scene that was happening. I have something to show you, I murmured quietly while collecting my phone. I used the smart home system to connect my phone to the enormous TV in the main room. With a few touches, I opened a document and projected it on the screen. What's this? Veronica inquired anxiously. This, I told you, is a restraining order I filed 14 years ago after you kicked me out on my 18th birthday. The room fell silent as the legal paper appeared on the screen. Even the caterer stood motionless, trays in hand. What are you talking about? Mom's voice broke the silence, a mix of confusion and outrage. We never kicked you out. You chose to leave. I kept my voice steady, years of practiced control paying off. You gave me an ultimatum on my 18th birthday, except that my college fund would go to Veronica's down payment or pack my bags. I packed my bags. You didn't stop me. That was a disagreement, not an eviction, Veronica snorted, keeping her gaze set on the document. You are being dramatic. I slept in my car for 2 weeks, I explained simply. In February. In Boston. A murmur spread among the assembled visitors. Dad walked forward, his face pale. I didn't know it was that bad, he remarked gently. You never told me. Would it have mattered? I inquired. He had no response to that. I swiped to the next document in my phone. This is more interesting though. This is why I filed the restraining order. The screen now displayed credit reports and loan applications in my name, all from shortly after I left home. What is this? Daniel inquired, leaning closer to the screen, his financial background helping him to comprehend what he was witnessing before the others. After I left, someone opened 3 credit cards and took out a personal loan in my name, I told him. They had my social security number, my birth certificate, and enough personal information to pass security questions. The total debt was just over $45,000. Mom's face had turned white. Veronica became really interested in her wine glass. Fortunately, I said, the detective who helped me was thorough. The credit cards were used at stores Veronica frequented. The loan money was deposited into an account that then transferred the exact amount to your joint checking account, Daniel. Daniel carefully turned to face his wife. You told me that money was from your mother. A gift to help with the down payment. It was, Veronica affirmed. Mom helped arrange it. By committing identity theft against your own daughter. Professor Hughes interjected, her intellectual manner giving way to protective wrath. That's a felony, in case you weren't aware. I'm sure there's been some Mom started. This is the police report I filed, I said, bringing up another document. I had enough evidence to press charges for identity theft and fraud. The detective was particularly interested in this loan application. I focused on a signature in which someone attempted to counterfeit my signature but misspelled my middle name. Veronica's hand shook so terribly that she had to put down her wine glass. If you filed charges, why weren't we arrested? She asked, her voice lacking conviction. Because I didn't pursue it, I explained simply. I was 18, terrified, and despite everything, you were still my family. So, I made a deal with a detective. I would pay off the fraudulent debts myself if they documented everything but held off on prosecution. I swiped to another document. This is proof of payment. Every cent of that $45,000, plus interest, paid by me over 3 years, while I was putting myself through college, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating ramen noodles to survive, while paying off debt I never incurred. Daniel appeared physically unwell. I had no idea, he murmured, his voice scarcely audible. Veronica told me her parents were helping with the down payment as a gift. Just one parent, I said gently. And it wasn't a gift. It was theft. Mom has finally found her voice. You're twisting everything to make yourself the victim, she was saying. We've always done everything we could for you. Sometimes families need to make hard choices for the greater good. The greater good? Dad asked, his voice rising unexpectedly. Margaret, she was 18, our daughter, and you stole from her. Mom turned against him. Don't you dare judge me, Richard. You walked away. You left me to handle everything. I left you, not our daughters, he replied. And I certainly didn't authorize you to steal Lena's college fund or commit fraud in her name. I knew about the college fund, he said, and he turned to me. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you, but the credit cards, the loan, I had no idea. I nodded and accepted his incomplete apology for what it was. Veronica adjusted her approach after witnessing her support crumble. It was a difficult time, she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. We had a baby, needed a home. Mom was just trying to help us, and you weren't around to ask. Maybe, I said. But that doesn't justify fraud. I swiped to another document. This might interest you too, Daniel. While investigating the identity theft, I discovered quite a bit about your family finances. These are records of 6 failed business ventures Veronica invested in without your knowledge, using joint funds. The total losses exceeded $200,000 over 8 years. Daniel's face had lost its color. What business ventures? Her college friend Megan's clothing boutique, her cousin's restaurant, a subscription box service for luxury pet products, among others, I put on paper. All failed within a year. All received substantial investments from your family accounts. Those were personal loans to friends, Veronica said faintly. They were going to pay back everything with interest. Is that why you hid the paper? The room had become uncomfortably tight. Guests were seeking for ways out, unsure whether to stay for this plainly private family crisis. I think, I stated loudly, that we've gotten off track. You came here today to claim my home for yourselves, based on the assumption that I would once again sacrifice my needs for Veronica's wants. I'm making it clear that will never happen again. So, you'll throw your own sister's family out on the street? Asked her mother. Where's your compassion? My compassion? I laughed. But there was no humor about it. Where was your compassion when I was sleeping in my car in winter? Where was your compassion when you stole my identity and left me with crushing debt before I'd even started college? Mom opened her mouth before closing it again. I'm not throwing anyone out on the street, I explained more softly. But I'm not giving up my home. If you need financial help, I'm willing to discuss setting up education funds for James, Freya and Caleb. They're innocent in all this, and I'd like to know my niece and nephews. We don't need your charity, Veronica snapped, despite Daniel's face indicating otherwise. It's not charity, I responded. It's family helping family the right way. Mom grabbed her purse. I think we've heard enough. Veronica, children, we're leaving. The children are upstairs playing video games, I reminded her. And I think Daniel might want to stay. Daniel nodded slowly. I need to understand exactly what's been happening with our finances, he told me. Kids will be fine for a while longer. Fine, Mom snapped. Veronica, let's go. As they approached the door, Isabella took a step forward. I think that's best. This is supposed to be a celebration of Lena's new home, not a venue for attempted property theft. Mom's face turned crimson red. How dare you? This is a family matter. Yes, Isabella responded. And Lena's chosen family is here to support her. You might want to think about what real family support looks like before you return. After they left, the party gradually recovered momentum, though talks naturally revolved around the dramatic incident. Daniel remained in the corner, speaking quietly with my financial advisor and periodically checking his phone for texts from Veronica. Later, as the guests began to leave, he approached me and formally stated, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea about the identity theft or the investments. I knew about the college fund, but Veronica told me you had agreed to it. Would it have mattered if you'd known the truth?" I questioned you. He considered it. I'd like to think so. But truthfully, I was different then. Success and money were all that mattered. He looked around the room. Looking at what you've built on your own, I realized how misguided my priorities have been. What will you do now? I inquired. Have a very difficult conversation with my wife, he said solemnly. And probably contact a divorce attorney. The financial deceptions are too significant to ignore. I felt an unexpected ping of sadness for my sister. Despite her imperfections, I never wished her marriage to end. I meant what I said about education funds for the children, I told the gentleman, regardless of what happens between you and Veronica. He nodded graciously. They'd like to know their aunt, especially James. He's interested in programming. After Daniel left to pick up the children, Isabella and I started cleaning up. Well, she began, tossing glasses into the dishwasher. That was the most dramatic housewarming I've ever attended. I laughed and felt lighter than I had in years. Not exactly the closure I expected, but closure nonetheless. Do you think they'll try to contact you again? Inquired the woman. Mom and Veronica. Eventually. When they need something. I shut the dishwasher and straightened up. But next time I'll be prepared. No more doormat. Lena. As the final guest left and the silence descended over my new home, I wandered through each room, admiring what I'd created. Not only was it a physical structure, but it also represented a life achieved through dedication, hard work, and the confidence to stand up for myself when it counted most. The days after the housewarming were unexpectedly tranquil. I expected Mom and Veronica to torment me, angry phone calls, manipulative texts, and possibly even unannounced visits. Instead, quiet. Daniel phoned me and asked to meet at a coffee shop near his office. Veronica moved in with your mother, he told me over lattes, 3 days after the party. She took the kids for now, but we've agreed to equal custody while we sort things out. I'm sorry about your marriage, I stated truthfully. He shrugged, appearing fatigued and relieved. After what came to light at your party, I started digging deeper into our finances. It's worse than you know. We're not just struggling, we're nearly bankrupt. How's that possible? You had a good position at the investment firm. Had, he reiterated. I was let go 6 months ago, downsizing. I've been working as a financial consultant since then, but making about a third of my previous salary. Meanwhile, Veronica continued spending as though nothing had changed. He pushed the folder across the table. These are statements from accounts I didn't even know existed. Credit cards maxed out. Loans I never signed for. Second mortgages on the house before we sold it. While reviewing the records, I experienced a sense of déjà vu. She did to you what she and Mom did to me? I inquired. Except on a much larger scale. He agreed grimly. We're talking hundreds of thousands in debt. What will you? Bankruptcy seems inevitable. He admits. I nodded in understanding. My offer for education funds still stands. I can set up accounts that can only be used for educational expenses. That would mean everything, he remarked with sincere gratitude in his voice. And maybe, would you consider spending time with them occasionally? They need stable adults in their lives right now. That conversation signaled the beginning of a new chapter for myself, Daniel, and the children. They were intelligent, inquisitive children who withstood their parents' disagreement with surprising perseverance. Around 2 weeks after the housewarming, Dad invited me to supper. Over pasta at a quiet restaurant, he expressed his thoughts on years of family strife. I failed you, he admitted honestly. After the divorce, Margaret made it difficult to maintain contact. But that's no excuse. I should have fought harder to stay involved in your life. Why didn't you? I asked, finally putting my thoughts into words after 14 years. He sighed heavily. Partly guilt. The divorce was my fault. I had an affair with my second wife before leaving. Margaret knew, and she used that as leverage to control everything, including access to you girls. This discovery altered my view of our family relationships, but it did not excuse his absence. I also failed to protect your college fund, he added. It was in a joint account with Margaret. I trusted her to use it appropriately despite our problems. When I found out what happened, I was too ashamed to confront you about it. You could have helped me, I stated. When I was sleeping in my car. I didn't know, he said. Margaret told me you'd moved in with a friend from school. By the time I learned otherwise, months had passed and you'd stopped responding to my messages. We talked for hours that night, clearing up years of misconceptions, half-truths, and downright lies. Dad wasn't blameless, but I realized he'd been manipulated by Mom almost as much as I had. Your mother wasn't always like this, he clarified. After Veronica was born, something changed. She became obsessed with creating a perfect life for her, often at your expense. I tried to balance things, to advocate for you, but it only created more conflict. Why the favoritism? I inquired, the question that had plagued my boyhood. He pondered this attentively. I think Veronica reminded Margaret of herself, the self she wanted to be. Beautiful, socially adept, traditional. You are more like me. Analytical, independent, questioning. And I think that scared her. The first communication from Veronica came 2 days after my meal with Dad. A long email that alternated between apology and justification. She admitted to identity theft, but blamed it on financial desperation and her mother's influence. She apologized for the housewarming argument but insisted that her family's needs took precedence over my luxury. Classic Veronica, Isabella observed as I gave her the email. Apologizing without actually accepting responsibility. At least she's acknowledging what happened, I said, feeling more generous now that I was safe from her influence. That's progress. Mother's approach was more straightforward. She began phoning every day, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry accusations to sad pleas. Families should forgive each other, she said in one message. We made mistakes, but so have you by embarrassing us in front of your friends. I did not respond to either of them right away, instead focusing on setting clear boundaries with my therapist, Dr. Jennifer Blake. Your mother and sister exhibit classic patterns of manipulative behavior, Dr. Blake observed during one session. They're used to you eventually giving in. Your continued boundary setting is unfamiliar and threatening to them. I feel guilty sometimes, I told you, especially about the kids being caught in the middle. That's natural, she promised me. But remember, you're modeling healthy boundaries for those children, and you're supporting them directly through the education funds and quality time. That's genuine family support, not the conditional kind you received. Daniel and Veronica's circumstances worsened over the course of several weeks. Their divorce processes uncovered other financial deceptions. Daniel filed for bankruptcy, as planned. Veronica and the children remained in Mom's modest home, which had become cramped and tense. 6 months after the housewarming, Daniel got a better job at a smaller company and rented a 3-bedroom apartment. The custody arrangement granted him access to the children every other week. Throughout his weeks I would pay James several visits, assisting him with programming assignments or simply offering another supporting adult presence. During one of these encounters, Daniel mentioned that Veronica had started therapy. Her therapist suggested it might help with the divorce and financial issues, he told me. I'm skeptical about her commitment, but it's a start. Around the same time, I finally agreed to meet Mom for coffee. The conversation was difficult but respectful. She had aged significantly in the 6 months since the celebration. Living with Veronica and the children is challenging, she told me. There's no privacy, no peace, and her spending habits. She paused, shaking her head. You enabled those habits, I kindly pointed out. I wanted her to have everything I didn't, Mom explained. An uncommon example of self-awareness. I grew up poor, wore hand-me-downs, never had the nice things other girls had. I swore my daughter would have better. You had 2 daughters, I reminded her. She had the decency to appear embarrassed. I know. I convinced myself you were stronger, more independent, that you didn't need the same support. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was the closest I'd ever gotten. This decades-long pattern of financial deception taught me that Mom's behavior was more than just favoritism. It revealed underlying concerns of control, entitlement, and possibly untreated mental health problems. Meanwhile, Veronica's therapy looked to be generating actual results. Our weekly meals with the kids moved from awkward to cautiously enjoyable. She got a job as an administrative assistant at a local company, her first serious job since marriage, and moved into a modest apartment when living with Mom became too expensive for both of them. "I've never learned to stand on my own," she admitted at one of our discussions. "Mom did everything for me, then Daniel took over. When everything fell apart, I had no idea how to function independently." I felt an unexpected sense of compassion as I saw her struggle with fundamental adult chores like budgeting, meal planning, and home maintenance. Veronica, like me, had been a victim of Mom's disorder, albeit in a different way. Her golden child status had hampered her ability to build resilience and self-sufficiency. The children adapted to their new situation with surprising adaptability. James, now 11, thrived in the coding group I introduced him to. Freya acquired a fascination for science that neither Veronica nor Daniel had recognized. Caleb's dinosaur passion grew into a more general interest in natural history. I established college funds for each of them, with the condition that the funds be spent solely for educational purposes, a safeguard against history repeating itself. Daniel and I formed an unexpected friendship based on mutual respect. He had confronted the financial calamity full-on, gradually repairing his credit and profession while becoming a more present father than he had ever been during his marriage. The bankruptcy was humiliating, he admitted, this truer version of Daniel. Not all relationships could be saved, however. Mom continued to avoid actual accountability, alternating between superficial apologies and sly explanations. During one especially challenging meal, she mentioned that my success was owed in part to her tough love style. "If we hadn't pushed you out of the nest, would you have developed the same drive?" she wondered, as if my homelessness had been a deliberate teaching moment rather than an abandonment. I cautiously set down my fork. "That's like saying abuse makes people stronger. Some survive despite it, not because of it. I succeeded in spite of how you treated me, not because of it." She swiftly changed the subject, since she was always uncomfortable with direct confrontation. These incidents confirmed Dr. Blake's assessment that, while Mom may change her conduct to preserve touch, true remorse or insight may never arrive. "Some people aren't capable of the depth of self-reflection necessary for genuine change," Dr. Blake told me. "You can adjust your expectations accordingly and decide what kind of limited relationship, if any, serves your well-being." By the time my house's one-year anniversary neared, I had set clear guidelines for family interaction. Monthly lunches with Veronica and the kids, occasional coffees with Mom, regular dinners with Dad, and more frequent time with the kids during Daniel's custody weeks. To commemorate the event, I arranged a small gathering, in stark contrast to the previous year's grand housewarming. Isabella accompanied her new fiancé. Professor Hughes and her husband attended. Dad arrived with Laura, their relationship now serious. Daniel brought the kids for a few hours, even Veronica made a brief and charming visit. Mom was noticeably absent. Her choice after I declined to invite certain toxic family friends she insisted on including. It was a little but crucial win in keeping my boundaries. As the evening progressed and people had dessert on the patio, James approached me with his laptop. "Aunt Lena, can you look at my code? I'm trying to build a game, but the graphics won't render properly." We sat on the porch swing, solving his JavaScript issues, as fireflies blinked in the coming dusk. The simple moment, an aunt assisting her nephew, family members supporting one another in healthy ways, brought tears to my eyes, which I quickly wiped away. "Are you okay?" James inquired, noting my emotion. "More than okay," I told him. "Just happier here." Later that night, when everyone had left, I wandered through my home, which was genuinely my in every way. The house had become a haven, not only from the outer world, but also from the harmful family habits that had nearly ruined me. Within these confines, I had created new rituals, connections, and a new understanding of family that was based on mutual respect rather than duty or manipulation. My journey from sleeping in my van at 18 to owning this lovely home at 32 was not solely about financial gain. It was about reclaiming my worth, setting healthy boundaries, and creating a life that reflected my ideals rather than others' expectations. My ties with my family would most certainly remain complex. Mom may never fully admit the devastation she has caused. Veronica's growth potential may be limited. Dad's attempts to make amends could not undo years of absence. However, I no longer required their validation or approval to feel whole. The terrified 18-year-old who drove away from her childhood home with nowhere to go had discovered not just safety, but also strength. She had realized that family is sometimes chosen rather than born, and that standing in your truth, no matter how difficult, results in genuine connection rather than hollow performance of obligation. As I sat on my veranda with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear in the summer sky, I felt tremendous serenity. The voyage had not been easy, but it had taken me exactly where I needed to be. Home in all senses of the word.